Welcome to Video 2 for the project to amend the City Zoning Ordinance. This presentation will cover changes to low-density residential zones. Before continuing, we encourage you to watch the 3.5-minute introductory video. Also, if at the end of this video you still have further questions or are wondering about terms used that you might not be familiar with, we encourage you to contact a Planning Division staff member. Also, please keep in mind that in an effort to keep these presentations under 15 minutes long, you may find that we haven't covered something in as much depth as you would like. We encourage you to pause the presentation on slides that interest you and review the information on the screen, as it will typically be more in depth than we cover in the audio portion. Over the course of this video series, you'll see this slide quite a bit. It's simply an overview of zone conversions, or which zones have been combined, removed, or added to the zoning ordinance as part of this project. For this video, we'll be focusing on low-density residential zones. As you can see on this slide, we're proposing to add a residential estate zone and combine the RP and RPA zones. We've also adjusted the standards for the R1 zone. Other topics that we'll cover in this video include a summary of the standards for each of the zones, accessory structures, home occupations, or home-based businesses, and accessory dwellings. One of the comprehensive plan policies that has never been implemented is the one you see on the upper left-hand side of the screen, to develop a zone to accommodate existing homes on lots of 1 acre or larger. As the city continues to grow, its boundaries come up against more and more properties that were developed in the county on large lots that have been allowed to have agricultural uses. Sometimes these properties need a city service, such as needing a sewer service when their septic tank fails. City policy has been to not connect properties outside city limits to city services. However, we don't have a zone that accommodates that development type very well. This zone is designed to recognize the need for a zone that brings these properties into the city while acknowledging they were developed to a large lot county standard. I want to emphasize that the policy states that the zone should accommodate existing homes. The purpose of this zone is not to promote new subdivisions with large lots of 1 acre or more. Because of the demands on water and how much land they consume, those types of developments are really better suited for county development. The goal here is to accommodate existing development as it comes into the city. The standards for this zone are based on Bonneville County's RA2 zone. Some of the standards include a minimum lot size of 1 acre, lots that are at least 150 feet in width, and have large setbacks, as you can see in the image on the upper right-hand side of the screen. On the lower left-hand side of the screen, you can see the allowed uses. There are some agricultural uses, which is really designed to accommodate a few animals. Home-based businesses are also allowed. You'll also notice that this zone allows a use called an accessory dwelling. This is something new to the Idaho Falls Code, and we'll cover it in more depth at the end of this presentation. The next slide talks about the RP zone. The RP zone in today's code really hasn't been used very much. The RPA zone also doesn't get used very often. Really, the R1 zone is the zone that gets used most often for residential development in Idaho Falls. However, what we have heard in many zoning hearings is that while the R1 zone is familiar and has no limit on how large a lot can be, it also allows lots as small as 6,000 square feet. Our proposed solution is to modify our large lot zones and our R1 zone to provide standards that are useful for both large and medium-sized developments while still providing some distinction between the two. The RP zone as proposed is a combination of the existing RP and RPA zones and the R1 zone as it has been used over the last few decades. It is meant for larger lot developments. The minimum lot size is 12,000 square feet, and there is no maximum lot size. The setbacks are, as shown in the upper right-hand side of the slide, reflect today's R1 zone. For those who currently live in an RP and RPA zone, rest assured that we are not changing the setbacks for your neighborhood. The code includes language that names subdivisions that were built prior to the adoption of this ordinance and specifies that the setbacks will remain what they have been since the time of development. These new standards will apply only to new developments. One standard that is changing, however, is how home-based businesses are handled. This will be covered in more depth on another slide, but if you live in an RP or RPA zone, make sure you stick with the presentation through the discussion of home-based businesses. As mentioned on the previous slide, the R1 zone has been used for all types of residential development. To help provide some distinction for this zone as more of a medium lot size zone, we've proposed 3 key changes to the standards. The first change is the introduction of a maximum lot size. Currently, there is no maximum in an R1 zone. We're proposing a maximum lot size of 12,000 square feet. This would not apply to cul-de-sac lots or other areas where the lot needs to be an odd shape to accommodate topography or other issues. The idea behind a maximum lot size is to provide some distinction between the R1 and the large lot zones. The R1 is still very functional and usable, but it suggests a more compact and walkable environment that has been suggested for many years in the comprehensive plan. The second change is to the front and side setbacks. The front setback has been reduced from 30 feet to 25 feet, and the side yard has been reduced from a 7-foot 6-inch minimum that increases as the building height increases to a minimum of 6 feet for the side yard that does not have to increase. This was in part to still allow a larger building footprint on the smaller lots. The Village, which is the subdivision near the soccer complex, is one example of where this technique has been used. The third change has to do with land uses. R1 has always allowed single-unit attached dwellings as a conditional use. This ordinance proposes to allow them as a use by right. The same standards will apply. For example, no more than 3 units can be attached, and they still have to be on a platted lot and have individual services to each unit, but there would no longer be a requirement for a public hearing. Home occupations, or home-based businesses, have traditionally been allowed in the R1 zone, but not the RP or RPA zones. That isn't changing with this code exactly. What is proposed to change is what we consider to be a home occupation. Right now, the ordinance does not specify any land uses that can or cannot be a home occupation. It only specifies the requirements that a business has to follow, such as no employees or no outdoor storage. This sometimes creates confusion and frustration about what uses are allowed and what uses are not. We are leaving all of the standards the same. What we are changing is to specifically list home-based business types that are not allowed, which is the list on the right-hand side of the screen, and also introduce a list of uses that we will not consider to be home occupations that will be allowed without a permit. That's the list on the left-hand side of the screen. What this means is that uses on the list on the left-hand side would be allowed in any residential zone, including the RP zone. The idea is their impact is so low, and because the use is taking place inside the dwelling with virtually no outside traffic, that they can exist without creating a nuisance to the surrounding neighborhood. If nuisances did arise, we would still respond to them and remedy any issues. We encourage you to pause the video at this time and study these 2 lists. For accessory structures, we haven't proposed to change much. And again, for properties currently zoned RP and RPA, these changes won't apply. The setbacks actually remain the same for accessory structures, where the rear yard is 0 feet and the side yard can be reduced to 0 feet when it is at least 12 feet behind the main structure. But there is one new exception. If an accessory structure is more than 10 feet in height, it must meet the same setbacks as the main building. Over the years, we've seen some issues with very tall accessory buildings being constructed right on property lines. This proposed standard will still allow taller buildings, but they will have to be kept back from adjacent properties. I mentioned earlier the concept of accessory dwellings. The next 2 slides will cover the concept and the standards. An accessory dwelling is a second dwelling unit on a property where a single unit dwelling already exists. You may have heard of it referred to as a mother-in-law suite or a granny flat, maybe even a carriage house above a garage. Where to allow these units was a topic of long discussion. For now, they are only proposed for the RE zone, where the lots are large enough that the impacts shouldn't be noticeable, zones that already allow multi-unit dwellings, and the traditional neighborhood zone that we'll cover separately in a different video. So for the RP and the R1 zones, these accessory dwellings are not proposed to be allowed at this time. Please take a look at the graphic on the screen. These represents common ways an accessory unit can be allowed, either internal to the existing dwelling with a shared entrance, as an attached unit with a separate entrance, or as a detached structure on the lot. Please also take a look at the second bullet point, which outlines the standards. You'll see that the size is very limited and only one unit is allowed per lot. We've tried very hard to write the standards that allow the additional space without turning homes into apartment complexes. This next slide includes additional standards for accessory dwelling units. You can see that we've added language that the owner of the property must reside on the property where an accessory unit exists. We'll also require an additional parking stall for the unit. We really do believe that these can be an important way to address housing needs that exist in the community in a way that's respectful and low impact. Thank you again for viewing this presentation. We hope you found it informative and helpful. We know that people's homes are typically their biggest investment and often their most valued asset. Along with addressing the policies of the comprehensive plan, we've tried to also address issues and concerns that we've heard brought up through public hearings and public outreach through the years. Again, please feel free to contact our staff with any questions that you might have, and we'd be happy to answer your questions and hear your thoughts on this important issue.